In 1985, a simple black nylon backpack appeared on the shelves of a Milan boutique. It was lightweight, waterproof, and defiantly modern. The material was industrial, not precious. Its lines were sharp, almost severe, and the triangular Prada logo gleamed like a secret code. Most of the world hardly noticed at first. Within a few seasons, the backpack was everywhere. It was on the arms of editors, actresses, and artists. It moved from Milanese sidewalks to the front rows of Paris and New York. Vogue called it a revolution. Fashion insiders whispered about its designer, Miuccia Prada, who had taken a risk on synthetics in a world obsessed with leather and silk. For decades, Prada had been a name whispered among Italian aristocrats, a mark of quiet luxury. Now, suddenly, it was a lightning rod for a new generation. People who once ignored the old-world brand now saw Prada as the future. The backpack, at once practical and subversive, sent shockwaves through the industry. It did not look like luxury, at least not the old kind, yet it challenged what luxury could be. Nylon was for army tents and parachutes, not high fashion. But by making it sleek and unapologetically expensive, Prada made it desirable. To wear it was to declare allegiance to a new order. Behind the bag was a woman few understood at first. Miuccia Prada, granddaughter of the founder, was a political science PhD with a flair for the avant-garde. She didn't care about convention. She wanted to upend it. Her background included mime classes in Paris and leftist activism in Italy's turbulent 70s. The fashion world was not sure what to make of her. She was not what they expected. Her first steps at Prada had been tentative. The company was small, known for careful leatherwork and old-fashioned trunks. Its client list included European royalty, but its influence stopped at the Italian border. The store in Milan's Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II was elegant but inward-looking. Few outsiders noticed its evolution. By the 1980s, Milan was changing. The city was growing rich, and its designers were rising. Armani, Versace, and Missoni were turning Italian style into a global phenomenon. Yet Prada, rooted in tradition, seemed out of step. When Miuccia joined the company in 1978, she found a business at a crossroads. Her mother, Luisa, managed the shop carefully, but the world was moving faster than ever. Miuccia's first intuition was to experiment. She worked quietly, searching for a material that would set Prada apart. Nylon was the answer. At first, her family was skeptical. Was this really luxury? Miuccia insisted. She saw beauty in the unexpected. The prototype backpack was refined, minimal, and nothing like the heavy leather bags of the past. When it launched, the response was mixed. Some dismissed it as a gimmick, others saw genius. Within months, it was a bestseller. The fashion press began to ask questions. Who was behind this audacious move? What was Prada becoming? As sales climbed, the company felt the first surge of global attention. Milan was now a capital of fashion rebellion, and Prada led the charge. In New York and Paris, young urbanites adopted the backpack as a symbol. It was both anti-bling and a new status marker. Wearing Prada signaled an understanding of irony, minimalism, and risk. The nylon bag became a passport to a new kind of luxury, one that valued innovation over heritage. Journalists tried to define the phenomenon. Was Prada high-tech chic? Was it a reaction to excess, or simply a smart way to stand out in a crowded market? Whatever the reason, the effect was undeniable. Other brands followed. Suddenly, synthetics were everywhere, but none captured the mystique of Prada's original. Miuccia, for her part, was unmoved by hype. She kept pushing boundaries. She hired her husband, Patrizio Bertelli, whose business instincts matched her creative drive. Together, they began to reimagine what the company could be. No longer just a leather shop, Prada was becoming a laboratory for ideas. The next few years brought rapid changes. Ready-to-wear collections appeared on the runway alongside accessories. Prada's look, sharp, cerebral, slightly unsettling, set it apart from the lush glamour of other Italian houses. Critics and consumers alike could sense something new was blooming under the surface. But even as Prada ascended, questions lingered. How did a quiet family business become a global force for fashion disruption? What risks did Miuccia take to break with tradition? And would the same boldness that fueled her rise also bring new challenges? Behind the scenes, the Prada family remained central to every decision. Old-world values clashed with new ambitions. Creative freedom was both a gift and a gamble. The backpack's success set off a chain reaction. Prada was now more than a store in Milan. It was an idea, a movement, and a mirror of cultural change. With every collection, Prada walked a tightrope between innovation and heritage. One false step, and all could be lost. But for now, the black nylon backpack had rewritten the rules. It was proof that luxury could be redefined, even in a world anchored by tradition. As customers lined up for their piece of the future, the question remained, was this just a fleeting moment of brilliance or the dawn of a new empire? Prada had set the world on edge. No one could predict what would come next, but everyone was watching. Chapter 2: Roots in the Galleria. A narrow street in Milan, 1913. Electric whispers of the new century drift through the city. A man enters the vaulted Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, shoes echoing on the marble. Mario Prada is not yet a legend. He is a craftsman with ambition and hope, carrying sketches and dreams in his leather satchel. He chooses the Galleria for a reason. This is no market stall, but a cathedral for commerce, crowned with glass and iron. Prada's new shop, Fratelli Prada, opens beneath the soaring dome, small, elegant, filled with handcrafted luggage and accessories. Milan's elite pass beneath the arches every day. Mario knows this is where fashion and power meet. He is meticulous, almost obsessive about every detail. The stitching on a travel bag, the clasp on a vanity case. He sources the finest materials in Italy. Every item must endure the journey by train, by coach, or by ship, yet still look flawless in a palace drawing room. Mario believes true luxury is restraint, refined, understated. At first, business is slow. Milan is already filled with leather workers, but word spreads quickly through the city's salons and cafes. The upper crust, used to Parisian flair, notice something different in Prada's designs. The bags are simple, almost severe, but their quality is unmistakable. Each piece feels both modern and timeless. Mario insists on using only the best artisans, many of whom have worked leather for generations. He visits workshops along the Ticino River, watching hands move as if guided by memory. He refuses to compromise, even when suppliers try to cut corners. If an order must be delayed to preserve quality, so be it. His reputation is being built stitch by stitch. Soon, the shop's clientele shifts. What began as a modest business catering to travelers becomes a discreet destination for the city's aristocracy. Countesses and industrialists order custom trunks. Jewelry boxes lined in silk sit beneath glass. Even diplomats and minor royals become regulars. The Prada family's name starts to carry weight beyond Lombardy. The First World War brings uncertainty. Raw materials become scarce and money grows tight. But paradoxically, the war also cements Prada's reputation. Soldiers and statesmen need luggage that can withstand the front lines and return home intact. Mario adapts, crafting pieces for durability as much as style. He keeps his shop open during long, uneasy nights. The Galleria is sometimes deserted, but Mario refuses to leave his post. Each day, he polishes the windows and rearranges the displays. Milan is battered, but his corner of the city endures, a beacon of quiet resilience. Mario's vision is uncompromising, but not grandiose. He does not dream of empires or world fame. He wants to create the best. He wants his shop to be a place where old money and new ambition intersect, quietly and with dignity. Between the wars, Milan blossoms again. Prada's reputation flourishes, carried by word of mouth and carefully chosen partnerships. Mario never advertises. Instead, he relies on exclusivity and discretion. The shop's window displays are sparse, never flashy, always mysterious. Inside, conversations are held in hushed voices over polished counters. By the late 1920s, the city's new elite, a generation of bankers, artists, and industrialists, see Prada as part of Milan's identity. Trunks stamped with the Prada crest travel to Venice, Paris, and London. For some, owning a Prada piece becomes a subtle declaration of status. But the world outside is changing. The Great Depression casts its shadow across Europe. Even the wealthy are cautious. Mario adjusts, designing smaller, more practical pieces. Vanity is tempered by necessity, yet Prada's reputation for quality never wavers. If anything, hardship only makes Mario more determined. He trains his daughter, Luisa, in the business. She learns not just how to sell, but how to judge the weight of leather, the sheen of a buckle, the balance of a handbag. Mario is demanding, not always warm. He teaches by example and by silence. Luisa listens, learning the secrets behind each decision. As the 1940s arrive, the world teeters on the brink of war once more. Prada survives by clinging to its roots. The shop remains a haven of stability in a city that changes with every headline. Mario grows old among his creations, watching the world swirl past the Galleria's glass ceiling. The end of the Second World War finds Italy exhausted but alive. Milan's fortunes revive, and so does Prada's. But Mario feels the weight of age. He spends more time in his office, surrounded by ledgers and swatches of leather, writing meticulous notes to his daughter. His passing is quiet, like the closing of a well-made clasp. The city mourns one of its silent giants. For the Prada family, the future is uncertain. Mario's vision has carried them through decades of turmoil and triumph. Now, there is no clear roadmap. The Galleria echoes with memories. Some customers, a little grayer, a little slower, still enter the shop expecting to see Mario behind the counter. Instead, they find Luisa, watching the door with a mixture of pride and apprehension. No one yet knows if the next chapter will be one of cautious preservation or radical change. The old world is disappearing, and the new remains unfinished. Milan waits, holding its breath. In the quiet after Mario's passing, a single question lingers in the air of the Galleria. Who now will carry the weight of the Prada name? Chapter 3: Miuccia Prada, the reluctant heiress. Miuccia Prada always seemed a step removed from legend. She was Mario's daughter, trained not for the spotlight, but for silence. The world outside was changing, impatient for speed and novelty, but inside the Galleria, time still respected tradition. When Mario died, many expected the old shop to fade quietly. Milan whispered that surely a man would take the helm, but there was no man left to step forward, only Luisa, watchful and reserved, carrying a surname heavy with expectation. She was not a natural heir. Luisa never sought applause or headlines. Her voice was soft, measured, almost cautious. She learned from her father's ledgers and his quiet rituals, not from art academies or Parisian ateliers. Her command was gentle but certain, like a hand smoothing leather. The 1950s brought a cautious optimism to Italy. Milan pulsed with new ambitions, but inside Prada, the pace stayed deliberate. Each product was still made with the same devotion to craft, each client still welcomed as an old friend. Miuccia believed in the value of consistency. She watched other brands chase trends, flooding the market with color and novelty. Prada, under her guidance, stayed loyal to the muted elegance of tradition. She insisted on the best leather, the subtlest hardware, the quietest luxury. She faced skepticism from suppliers and competitors. Some dismissed her as a caretaker, waiting for someone else to transform the business. Others underestimated her for being a woman in a world of men. Miuccia noticed, but she never allowed it to rattle her. Profit margins were slim. Post-war Italy was growing, but not everyone could afford true luxury. Still, for those who knew, Prada represented something rare, an unwavering standard. Word spread quietly through family, friends, and old customers returning from distant travels. Miuccia understood the dangers of reckless expansion. She refused to compromise the brand's reputation for the sake of sales. She watched as big houses made headlines, riding waves of post-war glamour, but she held her course. Prada remained discreet, steadfast, almost secretive. She made no grand announcements, no bold rebranding. The store windows changed little from season to season. Each piece of luggage or handbag bore only the tiniest mark of its maker. For Miuccia, authenticity was the best defense against the future's uncertainty. But the world did not stand still. Rome was electrified by La Dolce Vita. Milan's industry hummed with possibility. Women everywhere were finding new freedoms, appearing on factory floors and in boardrooms. Even the Galleria, with its mosaic floors and echoing arches, could not keep out these winds of change. Miuccia watched these shifts with a wary respect. She encouraged subtle updates, a new clasp here, a lighter lining there, but never at the expense of the brand's soul. While trends ebbed and flowed, she became the quiet guardian of her family's legacy. Prada stayed relevant, if not always fashionable. Her greatest struggle was with the burden of expectation. Her father's memory loomed in every decision, every order placed with a trusted craftsman. She knew that, whatever she built, it must honor the past without losing sight of tomorrow. Her leadership style was quiet defiance. She built relationships, slowly, methodically, with artisans, suppliers, and customers. She listened more than she spoke. She knew the names of her workers' children, remembered the preferences of clients who had shopped with Mario decades before. Miuccia's reign coincided with the rise of Italy's economic miracle. The country was reconstructing itself, and with growth came new kinds of pressure. Larger brands flirted with international expansion. American tourists began to trickle into Milan, searching for Italian craftsmanship with global cachet. She was urged more than once to expand, to open new stores or launch into ready-to-wear. Each time she resisted. Prada would not dilute itself to chase passing opportunity. She believed that survival lay in integrity, not in numbers. Some in the industry called her old-fashioned. Her refusal to court publicity left the brand an open secret among Milan's elite, but not a headline in glossy magazines. Yet for those who treasured the subtle, the enduring, Prada remained essential. Family life and business were inseparable. The shop was as much a home as any apartment. Miuccia's daughter, Miuccia, grew up among the perfumes of leather and varnish, watching her mother balance ledgers and resolve disputes with a quiet word. Even as Miuccia maintained discipline, she allowed glimpses of something new. Sometimes, late at night, she would consider how the world was changing for women. She wondered if Prada, too, might someday need to transform. By the late 1960s, the din of youth culture and revolutionary spirit could not be ignored. Milan was alive with protest, art, and ambition. Miuccia watched as her daughter, whip-smart and rebellious, grew more curious about the world outside the Galleria. The business was steady, but the future was uncertain. Miuccia felt the pressure of time in subtle ways: an aging client base, shifting tastes, the first rumors of fashion's globalization. She began to think that tradition could not be preserved by caution alone. There were days when Miuccia questioned her own legacy. Was her stewardship enough? Had she been too careful, too slow to adapt? Would the name Prada survive another generation, or would it be left behind as an artifact of a vanished Milan? Yet her greatest achievement was invisible. She had protected the soul of the brand through decades of upheaval. She kept the doors open, the standards high, the legacy intact. With each passing season, she proved that quiet strength could outlast the storms of fashion. In the early 1970s, Miuccia made a decision that would change everything. She invited her daughter, Miuccia, to take a more active role. It was not a formal succession plan, but an opening, a chance for the next generation to observe, to learn, to question. Miuccia entered the business almost as an outsider. She was fiercely independent, with ideas that seemed radical to old guard clients. But Miuccia knew that tradition could not survive without renewal. She watched her daughter with equal parts pride and apprehension. Together, they spent long hours in the back rooms, reviewing invoices and supplier contracts. Miuccia explained the logic behind every decision, the reason for every delay or investment. Miuccia challenged, questioned, sometimes defied. The dynamic between mother and daughter was not without friction. Miuccia understood that her time as steward was drawing to a close. The world was moving faster, demanding reinvention even from its oldest institutions. Yet she also saw potential, something restless, brilliant, in the way Miuccia approached even the most mundane tasks. The future was uncertain, but the foundation was solid. Miuccia did not know what Prada would become, only that it was time for new hands to carry the flame. In the Galleria, the echoes of Mario's footsteps faded into memory. The shop remained, but the air was different now, alive with the possibility of change and the tension between past and future. As Milan transformed outside its doors, Miuccia prepared to let go. She left her mark in ways no magazine ever chronicled. Her legacy was not measured in headlines, but in the quiet survival of a name. Change, she knew, was inevitable. How much of tradition could survive a daughter's revolution? That answer was waiting just beyond the threshold as Miuccia Prada took her first real steps onto the shop floor. Chapter 4: Miuccia's Awakening. Miuccia Prada never planned to inherit a fashion dynasty. In the early 1970s, the world she inhabited stood worlds apart from velvet and crystal. She was a university graduate, studying political science in Milan's crowded lecture halls. She marched in protests, handed out pamphlets, and debated Marxist theory in cramped apartments. Elegance had no place in her vision of social change. Yet everything kept circling back to the shop in the Galleria. Each family gathering reminded her of the legacy she tried to ignore. She watched her mother Miuccia pore over ledgers well into the night. The echo of Mario Prada's ambition still lingered in every corner. A restlessness grew inside her, a tug between two worlds that seemed impossible to unite. She was not blind to the contradictions. In public, she wore practical clothes, shunning anything that reeked of excess. In private, she felt the texture of fine leather and recognized its quiet power. Inherited taste clashed with political conviction. It left her doubting where, or if, she fit in her own family's story. Miuccia's early days at Prada were uncertain. She approached her new role with suspicion, almost as if she were a stranger trespassing in her own house. Long meetings with suppliers felt tedious. The shop's rigid formality seemed like a relic of a different era. Still, she watched and learned, absorbing every detail with an outsider's hunger. She couldn't ignore the sense that the world was changing faster than Prada was willing to admit. Milan crackled with youthful energy and creativity. New ideas flooded in from Paris and London. Designers pushed boundaries, upending expectations on and off the runway. To Miuccia, tradition without innovation felt close to decay. She began to experiment quietly at first. A subtle shift in a handbag's closure, a new shade of lining, small changes that most customers never noticed. But in the back rooms, murmurs of disapproval followed her. Suppliers were skeptical. Employees eyed her with caution, unsure if the boss's daughter would undo decades of stability. Miuccia felt the old order closing ranks, resisting her presence at every turn. Self-doubt haunted her at night. Was she simply rebelling against her own privilege, or could she build something new from its foundation? She read art magazines and political treatises side by side, searching for a way to bridge the gap. In her heart, the answers remained elusive. Then one evening at a trade show, Miuccia crossed paths with Patrizio Bertelli. He was a leather goods entrepreneur from Tuscany, confident and ambitious. Bertelli was unafraid to challenge convention. Where others saw risk, he saw opportunity. Their first conversation was tense, a collision of stubborn personalities and divergent visions. Bertelli criticized Prada's slow pace. He argued that the company was too cautious, too wedded to past glories. Miuccia bristled at his boldness, but recognized a rare kind of insight. He saw potential where others saw only boundaries. The debate quickly shifted from accusation to curiosity. They met again, this time with less formality. The arguments didn't stop, but something else emerged, a sense of possibility. Bertelli spoke about vertical integration, controlling every step from design to production. He believed luxury brands needed speed and adaptability, not just heritage. Miuccia listened. For the first time, she considered the idea that tradition might serve as a launch pad, not a cage. Miuccia's world was opening, one provocative idea at a time. She started spending more time in the workshops, talking directly to artisans. She asked questions no one else dared, about cost, about quality, about how small changes shifted the entire feel of a product. Her notebooks filled with sketches and observations. Underneath her critical exterior, a creative energy was building. With Bertelli's encouragement, Miuccia allowed herself to imagine what Prada could become. She envisioned materials never before associated with luxury. Nylon, for instance, so functional, so honest, so modern. What if it could be beautiful? What if craftsmanship didn't depend on tradition alone? The old guard saw these experiments as threats, not innovations. Miuccia met their skepticism with stubbornness. Yet she was careful. Every risk was measured, every step calculated. She insisted on the highest standards, pushing suppliers to achieve what seemed impossible. For the artisans, her demands were exhausting. But slowly, some recognized her relentless pursuit of quality for what it was, a new kind of devotion. As her confidence grew, so did her ambitions. Prada's window displays became more daring. The product line hinted at rebellion, even as it clung to restraint. Customers responded, some with shock, some with curiosity, and a few with admiration. The ancient shop was starting to thrum with energy again. Miuccia and Bertelli's partnership deepened. At first, it was purely professional, two visionaries with overlapping ambitions. Their disagreements were frequent, but always productive. Over time, a mutual respect grew. They challenged each other, testing every hypothesis, searching for weak points and hidden possibilities. Something fundamental had shifted. Prada's future would not be decided by tradition alone, nor by revolution for its own sake. Miuccia was learning to use her past as fuel, not an anchor. Bertelli brought rigor and discipline. Together, they began to map out a new direction. Quietly, almost without ceremony, power changed hands. Luisa stepped back, watching her daughter and Bertelli take command. Miuccia's early doubts never disappeared, but they no longer paralyzed her. She saw in Bertelli an ally who understood both risk and reward. They planned late into the night, talking about what Prada could mean to a new generation. The brand was ready for reinvention, but change would not come easily. Every bold step forward risked alienating loyal customers. Every innovation threatened the delicate balance between heritage and relevance. Miuccia was determined not to lose herself in the process. Outside the store, Milan thrummed with anticipation. Inside, Miuccia and Bertelli began to assemble a team, designers, artisans, and visionaries who shared their appetite for risk. They reimagined old designs. They hunted for new materials. Every success was hard-won, every setback a lesson. As the 1980s dawned, Prada stood on the edge of transformation. Miuccia's journey from outsider to creative force was far from over. The real test lay ahead. Would the world embrace the revolution she and Bertelli were planning? Few could have predicted just how much a single vision, guided by conviction and partnership, would echo through the high-gloss world of luxury. Miuccia had found her place, not by abandoning her ideals, but by weaving them into the very fabric of Prada itself. In the shadows of the Galleria, sketches of new designs began to pile up. Plans were whispered, then written, then put into motion. The Prada legacy was about to take on a new shape, strange, bold, and impossible to ignore. Change was no longer a question, it was a manifesto, and Miuccia Prada was ready to sign her name. Chapter 5: Reinventing Luxury. Reinvention was not a single moment, but a series of calculated risks. At its heart stood Miuccia Prada, a woman with the curiosity of a scholar and the instincts of a rule-breaker. By her side, Patrizio Bertelli, relentless and strategic. Together, they challenged every expectation of what a luxury brand could be. They understood that fashion was changing, the world was growing restless. Milan thrived on tradition, but cracks were starting to show. Department stores stocked the same old lines. The gap between heritage and innovation had never felt wider. Miuccia refused to play it safe. She saw opportunity in discomfort. Her ideas were met with skepticism, even inside Prada's own walls. Why reinvent what already worked? Why risk alienating loyal clientele with untested designs and strange materials? But Miuccia believed that the greatest danger lay in standing still. She started with the basics. Leather had been Prada's foundation for decades, but she craved something modern, something unexpected. She scoured suppliers, hunting for inspiration beyond the usual. Her eye landed on a material more often seen in military tents and luggage, black nylon. At first, the idea seemed absurd. Nylon was industrial, practical, utterly at odds with luxury, yet Miuccia saw beauty in its simplicity and strength. She designed a small backpack, unassuming, sleek, unbranded. No ornate logos, no flashy flourishes, just clean lines and a triangular metal tag. The prototype felt subversive. It was lightweight, functional, and entirely unlike anything on the market. When it hit shelves in 1985, it was dismissed by some as too plain. But soon, word began to spread. The backpack's sly confidence, its refusal to pander, made it the ultimate status symbol, for those who understood and for those who would. The backpack marked a turning point. It was more than a product, it was a statement. Luxury could be understated, it could be practical, it could challenge every expectation. Suddenly, fashion insiders were paying close attention. Editors, stylists, and buyers wanted to know what Prada would do next. Miuccia didn't stop there. If nylon could change the conversation, why not take on an even bigger challenge? Prada's next move, ready-to-wear, it was a leap into a fiercely competitive arena. For decades, established masons had dominated the runways of Paris and Milan. Most saw Prada as a leather specialist, not a fashion house, but Miuccia saw an opening. She believed that clothes could be as modern and cerebral as art or architecture. Her early collections puzzled observers. The silhouettes were sharp but never showy. Fabrics were chosen for their feel, not just their look. The colors were somber, even severe. There was nothing easy or traditionally sexy about these clothes, yet the effect was magnetic. The press called it ugly chic. Miuccia called it honest. Patrizio Bertelli transformed the business behind the scenes. He pushed for efficiency, slashed unnecessary costs, and demanded the highest standards from every supplier. Under his watch, Prada's operations became a well-oiled machine. The combination of creative risk and business discipline was rare and powerful. But with each expansion, the stakes grew higher. Fashion was not immune to commercial pressure. The more Prada innovated, the more buyers and investors demanded results. Was it possible to grow without compromising vision? Could a company double its size and keep its soul intact? Inside the company, debates grew heated. Should Prada lean into its newfound status or protect its outsider edge? Some argued for more accessible designs. Others wanted to keep the collections exclusive, almost secretive. Miuccia stood her ground. She listened to advice, but refused to back down on what mattered most. Integrity, she believed, was its own kind of luxury. Meanwhile, global expansion was no longer a distant dream. Suddenly, Prada boutiques appeared in cities far from Milan. New York, Paris, Tokyo, each opening carried risk and excitement. Each one tested the brand's ability to adapt while staying true to itself. Patrizio handled the logistics, scouting locations, negotiating leases, building teams from the ground up. Miuccia focused on the creative message. Prada would not dilute itself to please a new audience. Instead, it would invite the world to see beauty on its own terms. The constant push and pull between innovation and scale weighed on both of them. Some nights, exhaustion set in. The business was growing faster than anyone had imagined. The pressure to deliver, season after season, never let up, but neither was willing to slow down. For Miuccia, every collection was a manifesto. For Patrizio, every balance sheet was a battleground. The outside world began to notice something unusual. Prada was not just a brand, it was a conversation. On magazine covers and in museum exhibitions, critics hailed the new Prada as both unsettling and essential. The backpack became a cult object, then a classic. The ready-to-wear line won awards. Competitors tried to copy the minimalist look, but could never quite capture its quiet rebellion. Still, internal tensions remained unresolved. Success brought new dangers. There were offers from investors, whispers of takeover bids. The larger Prada grew, the more outsiders wanted a piece. Miuccia and Patrizio debated how much control they could afford to surrender. Their partnership, forged in risk, now found itself tested by the very victories they'd worked so hard to achieve. Each decision seemed to matter more than the last. Every collection was scrutinized by critics and accountants alike. Would Prada's fierce independence survive the temptations of global expansion? Would innovation continue to lead, or would commerce finally take the wheel? The final years of the decade brought no easy answers. What began as a daring experiment had become an empire in the making. The world of luxury was watching, sometimes admiring, sometimes waiting for Prada to stumble. But Miuccia and Patrizio moved forward, step by step, refusing to sacrifice vision for the sake of scale. As the new millennium approached, A question lingered in the air. Could a company built on rebellion survive its own success? For Prada, the answer would not come quietly. The next chapter would be written in risk, rivalry, and reinvention on a stage that now spanned the globe. Chapter 6: The Empire Builders. On the cusp of the 1990s, Prada stood at a crossroads. They had conquered the conversation in fashion, but Miuccia and Patrizio saw more, much more. Global ambition was no longer optional. It was inevitable. Patrizio Bertelli, ever the strategist, had a vision that went beyond Milan's boutiques. He saw an empire, a constellation of brands, all orbiting Prada's creative sun. He believed scale would protect their independence. Expansion was the shield, but it was also a sword. Miuccia, meanwhile, viewed growth with suspicion. She was protective of what made Prada unique. Every new project risked diluting that secret alchemy of intellect, art, and provocation. Still, she moved forward, sometimes cautiously, sometimes with sudden daring. The first big leap came in 1992 with the launch of Prada's menswear line. The move was bold. This was not just women's fashion reimagined for men. It was an experiment in identity, subtle, cerebral, and oddly subversive. Critics praised it. Sales grew. Prada men's stores appeared in major cities, each one a signpost of the brand's rising reach. But even this was only the beginning. In 1993, Miuccia unleashed her most personal project yet. She named it Miu Miu, a nickname from childhood, a brand for the rebellious younger sister she never had. Miu Miu was raw, playful, and unpredictable. It seemed to break every rule that Prada had just written. The first Miu Miu collections were a shock to the system. Clashing patterns, unfinished hems, a deliberate awkwardness that made even insiders uneasy. Yet the press took notice. Buyers lined up. Miu Miu was a laboratory, a risk, and almost overnight, a hit. Patrizio saw in Miu Miu the proof that Prada could be more than a single voice. He pushed for more stores, more collections, more of everything. He began to look outward, beyond their walls, at the luxury world's rising stars. The 1990s were a time of consolidation in fashion. Houses that once competed now merged or formed alliances. Patrizio wanted Prada at the center of this new order. His answer was acquisition. Prada invested heavily in other brands. They bought stakes in Jill Sander, the German minimalist powerhouse. They acquired Helmut Lang, the Austrian designer known for his intellectual rigor. Next came Church S., the storied English shoemaker, famous for tradition and craftsmanship. Each deal brought opportunity. Each deal brought risk. Integrating these diverse brands proved far more complex than anyone expected. Cultures clashed. Visions diverged. The Prada teams struggled to manage companies with their own histories, egos, and creative tensions. At times, it seemed as if the empire was growing faster than its architects could control. Stores multiplied around the globe. Flagships opened in Paris, London, New York, Tokyo. The architecture was as radical as the clothes, glass, steel, and stone, curated by Rem Koolhaas and Herzog and de Meuron. Prada was not just selling fashion anymore, it was selling a universe. Growth became its own addiction. Revenues soared. The press called Prada the last independent giant. Investors circled, eager for a piece of the action. The couple found themselves at the center of a new kind of luxury war. But the old tension between Miuccia and Patrizio deepened. He pushed for scale, for power, for casting a wider net. She pushed back, worried that every expansion risked the soul of Prada. In boardrooms and late-night dinners, their debates grew more pointed. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they simply worked in silence, each aware of what was at stake. The fashion industry was changing too. New money flooded the market. Rivals merged into sprawling conglomerates: Gucci, LVMH, Rickymont. The game was no longer just about design. It was about territory, about influence, about survival. Prada's empire strained under its own weight. Managing multiple brands exposed cracks in the foundation. Not every acquisition paid off. Jil Sander herself departed in a clash over creative control. Helmut Lang, too, grew disillusioned. Churches struggled to adapt to the demands of a global luxury group. Behind the sleek facades, nerves frayed, debt mounted. Some bankers warned that Prada was moving too fast, that ambition was outpacing reality. But retreat was never part of Patrizio's vocabulary. Miuccia, meanwhile, doubled down on innovation. She launched new ideas, like art foundation projects and collaborations with contemporary artists. Prada stores became art spaces as much as retail outlets. She risked confusion, but she refused stagnation. Through it all, the couple kept control. They resisted calls to go public. They vetoed takeover bids. Outsiders saw a united front, but insiders whispered that the balance was delicate. Every decision was a gamble. Every step forward risked disaster. Yet the numbers kept climbing. By the late 1990s, Prada had become both a style leader and a business powerhouse. Some called it the thinking person's luxury empire. Others wondered if the company had simply gotten too big, too fast. Around them, the luxury world was shifting. The Asian market was rising. American consumers wanted instant icons, not slow evolution. The internet was on the horizon, threatening to upend centuries-old rules. Prada's expansion, once a masterstroke, now looked increasingly like a high-wire act without a net. Internally, teams struggled to keep pace. New collections overlapped with new store openings. Old friends and trusted managers left, burned out by the relentless pace. Prada had always been about pushing boundaries. Now, the most dangerous boundary was the company's own breaking point. But ambition is a hard habit to break. Patrizio talked of more acquisitions, more lines, more markets. Miuccia dreamed of other revolutions, of fashion that mattered, of art that lasted. Sometimes it seemed their dreams would tear the company in two. By the turn of the millennium, cracks were visible. Headlines shifted from praise to questions. Was Prada still a visionary or just another corporate giant? Could creative risk survive the demands of relentless growth? The financial world watched closely. So did their competitors, eager to see if the Prada model could endure. The empire builders had shown what was possible. Now they faced the cost. In luxury, every step forward casts a longer shadow. At Prada, those shadows were growing darker. The age of expansion was ending. The age of reckoning had begun. Not every kingdom survives its own conquest. The next chapter would test whether Prada could. Chapter 7: The Crisis Within. In the glossy boardrooms of Milan, reality hit with the force of a closing vault. The numbers on Prada's ledgers no longer dazzled, they threatened. Debt, once a quiet rumor, became impossible to ignore. Every ambitious acquisition from the past years now came with a hefty price tag. Jil Sander, Helmut Lang, Church S. Investments meant to build an empire now weighed down the ship. Patrizio Bertelli, the relentless driver behind Prada's expansion, stared at financial reports and saw storm clouds. Interest payments mounted, squeezing margins. The banks called more often. Credit became expensive, then elusive. The world's appetite for luxury had not vanished, but something fundamental was changing. Tastes were shifting faster than ever, and confidence in Prada was quietly eroding. Inside the company, the mood darkened. The creative teams, once unleashed to revolutionize fashion, felt the grip of cost-cutting. Grand projects stalled. Store openings slowed to a crawl. For the first time in years, the word retrenchment replaced expansion in executive meetings. Miuccia Prada, always the soul of the brand, found herself at odds with the new reality. Art and inventions suddenly had to answer to balance sheets. Outside, the press sensed blood. Analysts who once cheered the Prada vision now circled with pointed questions. Had the brand become too big, too fast? Could even Miuccia's creative genius survive the weight of corporate ambition? Every stumble fed the narrative. The company's mystique, carefully built over decades, seemed to evaporate with every disappointing quarterly result. Family dinners grew tense. Miuccia and Patrizio argued late into the night. Should Prada consolidate and play it safe, or should they double down, risking everything for another leap forward? Their visions clashed. Bertelli saw the power of scale, the necessity of global reach. Miuccia hung on to the primacy of the idea, the spark that made Prada matter. Even their son, Lorenzo, still young but observant, witnessed the toll ambition took. The luxury industry watched, but the greatest pressure came from within. Longtime employees whispered about layoffs and restructurings. Former allies departed in frustration. The family felt the sense of siege. It was more than business. It was legacy, pride, and the fear of failure. As debt mounted, hard decisions became inevitable. The conglomerate dream had to be sacrificed. One by one, Prada's new acquisitions were put up for sale. Jill Sander, once hailed as a crown jewel, was the first to go. Helmut Lang followed, then Church S. Each departure brought relief, but also a sting of defeat. Every sale was a broadcast to the world. The Prada experiment had boundaries after all. The fantasy of an Italian luxury supergroup faded. Instead, the company shifted its gaze inward, back to the original house, the core brands. Even there, nothing was certain. Every move was scrutinized. Every expense, every hire, every launch was debated. For Bertelli, selling the acquisitions meant swallowing pride. He had dreamed of an empire. Now it was survival. He fought to preserve control, to keep the family's grip on the company they had reshaped. Miuccia mourned the shrinking horizons, but refused to retreat creatively. She insisted that the magic of Prada could not be measured in quarterly results. Regret filled the air, but so did resolve. The company would not go quietly. They trimmed the fat, closed unprofitable outlets, and curtailed spending. Patrizio renegotiated with banks, fighting for better terms. Miuccia doubled down on design, seeking to prove that the brand's soul was still intact. The story of evolution became a story of endurance. Staff who remained grew fiercely loyal. Those who left often did so with respect, not anger. The crisis tested every relationship, strained every partnership, and defined a generation of leaders inside Prada. The lessons were costly, but unforgettable. The market slowly took notice. As the debt shrank, the panic faded. Prada, once the symbol of unchecked ambition, became an example of painful but necessary discipline. The experience scarred the company, but also brought unexpected clarity. The family realized that growth was not the only measure of greatness. Sometimes, survival was a greater victory. The crisis within Prada changed more than spreadsheets. It shifted the axis on which the whole company spun. No longer just a dream of limitless expansion, it became a house that valued its own foundation. The family, for all their differences, stayed united where it mattered most. Control remained tight. Vision, while battered, still burned. As the dust settled, one question lingered in the halls of Prada and in the minds of its competitors. Was this the end of an era or the beginning of something quietly stronger? The next move would reveal everything. In the business of luxury, history rarely forgives excess, but it does sometimes reward survival. At Prada, for the first time in decades, the future was less about conquest and more about endurance. The empire had been humbled, but not broken. Some brands splinter under pressure, others crystallize. Prada, forged in crisis, now faced the world with a new understanding. The story wasn't finished. If anything, it was about to take an unexpected turn. Chapter 8: Reinvention and Resilience. A decade earlier, nobody could have predicted that Prada would nearly unravel. Even fewer believed it could recover with its spirit intact. But as the company emerged from its self-inflicted storm, a strange quiet filled its Milanese headquarters. For the first time in years, growth was not the only obsession. Survival had sharpened priorities. The early 2000s forced hard choices. Store openings slowed. Expansion plans were slashed. Entire divisions were reviewed line by line. Loss-making ventures, once symbols of global ambition, became liabilities. One by one, Prada let go, selling off brands it had acquired in its empire-building frenzy. It was not easy. Each sale felt like an admission of error, a reversal that strung Miuccia, Patrizio, and the inner circle. But the alternative was oblivion. As debts shrank, a new atmosphere settled in. Meetings became more focused. There was less talk of dominance and more about excellence. Miuccia Prada, always known for her avant-garde instincts, faced a new challenge. How could she spark creativity while making sure every move was safe enough to keep the company afloat? Patrizio Bertelli, her husband and partner, reworked the business playbook. He demanded discipline, cut back excess, and pressed for clear financial goals. But he never lost sight of the company's soul. For both, the next era would need a delicate balance. They would protect Prada's essence, its family leadership, its independence, even as the fashion world demanded constant reinvention. This new humility was unfamiliar. In the luxury world, admitting mistakes could be deadly, but for Prada, honesty became a hidden strength. The crisis had stripped away delusions. What remained was raw but real. Still, pressures grew from every direction. The early 2010s saw new global competitors, from heritage houses to fast fashion disruptors. The rise of China and the digital economy redrew the map of luxury. Brands were bought, merged, or erased in months. Investors circled, hungry for a piece of enduring names. For Prada, the response was both bold and defensive. In 2011, the family made a decision that startled much of Italy. Prada would go public, but instead of listing in Milan or London, they chose the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The move was radical. It brought the company close to the fastest-growing luxury market on earth, China. The IPO raised billions and cemented Prada's position as a global power, but it also exposed the company to new scrutiny. Analysts dissected every number. Hedge funds and institutional investors now had a say. The family's tight grip was tested by the demands of quarterly results. Inside Prada, the mood was uneasy. The IPO was a victory, but also a gamble. Would the company's creative core be sacrificed on the altar of profit? Could family control survive relentless market pressure? Miuccia Prada never underestimated these risks. She had watched the industry devour icons before. Her answer was to double down on what made Prada unique. Instead of chasing every trend, she cultivated a reputation for intellectual fashion, collections that puzzled, challenged, or even provoked. Spring after spring, her designs defied easy interpretation. Some labeled her work cold, others called it brilliant. For Miuccia, the purpose was not to please everyone, but to stay one step ahead. She believed the brand's relevance came from discomfort, not conformity. But even Prada could not ignore the world outside. Consumers changed. Social media accelerated the speed of fashion. Sustainability became urgent. New generations cared less about pedigree and more about values. Patrizio Bertelli responded with tough reforms. Supply chains were scrutinized. Environmental initiatives appeared. The company started to speak openly about transparency and ethics, words that had never been part of the luxury playbook. These changes brought tension. Some insiders feared that tradition would be lost. Others doubted the wisdom of adapting too quickly. Prada's old guard clashed with digital natives hired to update the brand. Every innovation risked alienating loyalists, even as it courted the future. Perhaps the most dramatic test came from within the family. Miuccia and Patrizio's son, Lorenzo Bertelli, entered the business. Young and ambitious, he brought new energy and new questions. Lorenzo pressed for digital innovation and communication strategies that his parents had once resisted. At meetings, generational differences became clear. But for Prada, family was not just about blood. It was a living negotiation between past and future. One morning in Milan, Miuccia Prada paused outside the company's archives. Decades of sketches, prototypes, and fabric swatches lined the walls. She ran her hand over a nylon backpack, the piece that had transformed the company in the 1980s. The lesson was obvious. Reinvention was part of survival. Every generation faced its own crisis. In 2020, another jolt arrived. Raf Simons, an acclaimed but polarizing designer, joined Prada as co-creative director. The announcement stunned the industry. For the first time, Miuccia would share her creative power with an outsider. Simons' arrival sent a clear message. Prada would not retreat into nostalgia. Instead, it would risk everything on new ideas. The partnership was uneasy at first. Two powerful visions sometimes collided, but both designers understood the stakes. The world did not want copies, it wanted courage. Their collections combined intellectual rigor with emotional punch. Some garments were instantly praised, others sparked debate, but no one could accuse Prada of playing it safe. Backstage, Miuccia and Raf debated concepts late into the night. Patrizio watched the numbers, wary but hopeful. Lorenzo pushed for digital campaigns and sustainability projects that would have seemed impossible 10 years before. Everyone had a role. No one had all the answers. On the trading floors, analysts waited to see if creativity would translate into profits. In the boutiques, longtime clients returned, curious about the new spirit. Younger shoppers, raised online, discovered Prada through viral moments and collaborations. The tension between past and future never disappeared. Instead, it became the company's pulse. Every decision was scrutinized. Every collection invited both applause and criticism, but Prada learned to draw strength from its contradictions. Meanwhile, the family's control remained intact. Despite public listing, Miuccia, Patrizio, and their son held the reins. Their unity was not always seamless, but it was unmistakable. Prada's boardroom was not a battlefield, it was a laboratory for risky ideas. As the 2020s advanced, Prada's resilience became its most valuable asset. Other houses focused on spectacle or scale. Prada invested in something harder, credibility. The brand's reputation for innovation, even when controversial, became a shield against imitation. When asked to explain Prada's secret, insiders offered different answers. Some spoke of discipline, others of chaos. Some saw a fortress, others a laboratory. In truth, Prada's reinvention was a daily project, never finished, always urgent. At a small dinner in Milan, Miuccia once raised a glass to the future. The table was full of family, old friends, and rivals. She reminded them that Prada's greatest strength was its refusal to stand still. Survival, she said, was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of another chapter. In the world of luxury, few names inspire as much debate, envy, or imitation as Prada. The company's scars have not faded, but neither has its ambition. Every collection, every campaign, every new face in the boardroom is another move, in a game that never truly ends. As night closed over Milan, the lights in Prada's headquarters burned late. Somewhere in the archives, an unfinished sketch waited. Reinvention was never comfortable. For Prada, it was non-negotiable. Chapter 9: A New Generation and New Challenges. The next morning, Lorenzo Bertelli arrived at the office before dawn. He moved quietly through the marble corridors, past walls lined with decades of sketches and press clippings. He was the son of Miuccia Prada and Patrizio Bertelli, heir to a legacy built on rebellion and risk, but his world was not their world. Lorenzo had grown up in the shadow of two titans. He had seen the arguments, the late nights, the obsession with details that others dismissed as trivial. He had also seen the cost. In his 20s, he was more interested in rally racing than in handbags or board meetings. But as the empire grew, so did the pressure to step inside the family business. When Lorenzo officially joined Prada, there was skepticism. In the world of luxury, second-generation heirs often fail. They cling to nostalgia or chase trends with reckless speed. Lorenzo tried something different. He studied the company from the inside out, starting in communications, then digital strategy. He wanted to understand the language of a new generation, one that scrolled, swiped, and streamed. The market had changed. Luxury was no longer just about rarity, it was about relevance. Prada, once the definition of avant-garde, now faced competitors who spoke the language of youth fluently. Streetwear, social media influencers, and viral memes were rewriting the rules of what it meant to be desirable. The stakes were higher than ever. Beneath the surface, a new chapter in the family dynamic began to unfold. Miuccia and Patrizio had always been two sides of a coin, one restless, the other relentless. Now, with Lorenzo, a third force entered the equation. He brought optimism, but also urgency. He challenged old routines, pushed for faster digital transformation, and questioned what luxury should mean in the age of Instagram. Some insiders noticed tension, polite but real. Patrizio, known for his stubborn streak, was wary of dilution. Miuccia, who thrived on contradiction, sometimes relished her son's provocations. The three rarely disagreed in public, but behind closed doors, debates over algorithms, sustainability, and creative risks could last for hours. All the while, the outside world spun faster. A decade earlier, the idea of fashion shows on TikTok sounded absurd. Now, ignoring digital platforms meant irrelevance. Prada was late to some trends, but Lorenzo's arrival marked a shift. Under his guidance, the brand overhauled its e-commerce and digital marketing. They embraced collaborations that once would have been dismissed as gimmicks. Yet even as the company raced to modernize, another transformation was taking shape. In 2020, Prada shocked the fashion world by announcing Raf Simons as co-creative director. Simons was known for his cerebral minimalism and cult following. Miuccia's decision to share the spotlight was unprecedented. For nearly 4 decades, she had ruled Prada's creative universe alone. Why bring in a partner now? Some speculated fatigue. Others saw it as a strategic move, a way to inject fresh energy and connect with younger consumers. Miuccia described the partnership as an experiment, a conversation rather than a merger. For Prada, collaboration was no longer a threat, it was a survival tactic. The Simons era began during a time of global uncertainty. The pandemic had upended the rhythms of luxury. Runways were deserted, boutiques shuttered, and consumer habits scrambled overnight. Miuccia and Raf presented their first joint collection in an empty room. The event was streamed online, watched not by critics in the front row, but by millions on their phones and laptops. The response was cautious but intrigued. Reviews focused on the dialogue between two strong voices, neither overpowering, both adapting. Simons brought rigor, Miuccia brought instinct. Together, they tried to invent a new language for Prada, one that balanced history with invention. The experiment was not without its risks. Old guard purists grumbled about lost identity. Younger fans craved even more disruption. The family watched these shifts from inside the boardroom and out in the world. Prada's legacy was no longer a given. Every decision carried a shadow of what had worked and of what had not. Lorenzo, learning from his parents' hard-won lessons, knew that heritage alone could not guarantee relevance. He advocated for sustainability initiatives, digital transparency, and more open dialogue with customers. But the path forward was never linear. The luxury sector faced rising demands for accountability. Climate change, labor rights, and cultural sensitivity became as crucial as hemlines or heel heights. Brands that failed to adapt risked not just irrelevance, but backlash. Prada tried to listen, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with surprising grace. They launched new eco-friendly materials and invested in charitable partnerships. The results were mixed. Progress was slow, criticism inevitable. Internally, the question of succession lingered. Was Prada a family business or a global corporation? Could generational change happen without tearing at the fabric of its identity? Miuccia and Patrizio, both approaching milestones, insisted they were not stepping aside, but their presence in the company's daily life began to evolve. Miuccia's instincts remained central. Patrizio's discipline kept the trains running. Lorenzo's influence, though subtle, grew more visible, especially on issues that had no precedent in the family playbook. Outside, competitors watched closely. Some predicted a smooth transition. Others whispered about possible fractures or buyouts. In high fashion, legacy brands are tempting targets for conglomerates hungry for prestige and profit. Prada resisted. Their structure, with the Bertelli Prada family holding firm control, made an outright takeover unlikely, but the pressure was constant. Meanwhile, the creative partnership with Raf Simons continued. Each season, the world waited to see who would win the latest round of the brand's internal debate. Would heritage triumph over experiment or vice versa? The answer changed year by year. For the people inside Prada, designers, artisans, executives, the stakes felt personal. They were no longer just employees. They were guardians of something that had survived wars, revolutions, and recessions. Each day was a negotiation between past and future. Social media brought new scrutiny. Every misstep was amplified. But so were small victories, a well-received campaign, an innovative runway show, a successful digital launch. In the digital age, reputation could disintegrate overnight, but it could also be rebuilt, pixel by pixel. At family dinners, the old hierarchies softened. Topics ranged from supply chains to science fiction, from digital privacy to the ethics of influence. Lorenzo sometimes clashed with his parents, but the arguments were a sign of life, not decline. As the decade closed, the question of legacy became impossible to ignore. What would the next chapter look like? Could the Bertelli Prada dynasty survive another generational handoff? Would risk-taking remain the brand's defining trait, or would caution take over as the world grew more unpredictable? The answers remained uncertain. Only one thing was clear: Prada's story was not about immortality, but about movement. The next move belonged to a family that had made reinvention a tradition. In the end, legacy was just a word. The real question, one that hung in every corner of the Galleria and every corner office, was simpler and harder. How much longer could Prada stay ahead of itself? Chapter 10: The Legacy of Prada. No one truly knows where legacy begins. Sometimes it's a name carved in stone. Sometimes it's a movement that outlives its creators. For Prada, legacy is a living thing, restless, evolving, and never quite finished. Across more than a century, the brand has changed skins as often as it has changed hands. But its influence on fashion, on culture, on the very idea of luxury, is undeniable. In the world of high fashion, trends are born and die in silence. Prada's influence, however, has always made noise. The black nylon backpack, introduced when everyone else celebrated opulence, became an icon by defying convention. Functional, minimalist, and subtly rebellious, it whispered that luxury could be practical. It dared other houses to experiment and adapt. Today, every major fashion house has felt the aftershock of that one product. Luxury was no longer about showing off. It was about knowing, about having the confidence to do less and mean more. But Prada's mark is bigger than a single object. The brand has repeatedly redefined what it means to be modern. In an industry obsessed with heritage, Prada has used its past as a springboard, never a cage. Each new collection is a negotiation with memory and with change. Sometimes this has meant risk. Sometimes it has meant failure, but always it has meant motion. The story is not just about clothes and accessories. It's about the tension at the heart of every creative business, the double-edged sword of originality. Miuccia Prada herself called fashion instant language. But even instant languages can become outdated. Staying ahead means questioning your own rules, breaking your own patterns, even if it means leaving behind what once worked. Commerce is relentless. The demands of expansion, the hunger for growth, the expectations of shareholders, all can squeeze the soul out of a creative house. Prada's most difficult years came when ambition ran faster than discipline. Acquisitions and global bets brought the company to the edge. Yet in stepping back, refocusing, and sometimes starting over, the family showed that strength is often a matter of restraint. Growth for its own sake is never enough. For Prada, survival has meant returning again and again to the question, what do we stand for? What is worth preserving? What must be reinvented? The answers are rarely simple. Some seasons, creativity comes at a cost. Designers burn out, markets shift, customers drift to the next big thing. Yet, Prada's DNA has always included a unique kind of resilience. It's not about perfection, but about persistence, about the refusal to let any single failure define the brand's future. This is where family matters most. The Prada Bertelli dynasty has never left the stage. Unlike many rivals swallowed by conglomerates or diluted by public markets, Prada's controlling hands remain within the family. This choice has protected the brand's integrity, but also exposed it to the risks of insularity. Family control allows for bold decisions and the patience to see ideas through. It also invites tension, debate, and the occasional generational standoff. Right now, a new chapter is being written. The addition of new creative voices, the embrace of digital innovation, the slow but steady opening to new leadership, all signal that the company is not standing still. But no one inside Prada believes the work is ever finished. They know the line between relevance and irrelevance is razor-thin. Every season, every collection, every campaign is a test. Prada's impact on the industry is echoed in the careers it has shaped. Designers who passed through its halls have gone on to steer other great houses, taking with them a piece of the Prada philosophy. Luxury, as defined by Prada, means never repeating yourself for too long. It means resisting nostalgia, even when nostalgia is profitable. It means treating the brand's own history as raw material, not as a blueprint. The balance between commerce and creativity remains a moving target. It's a paradox that Prada has never fully resolved, and perhaps never will. That tension between risk and caution, between tradition and reinvention, is what keeps the brand alive. For every iconic collection, there is a boardroom negotiation. For every radical runway, there is a careful calculation about what the market will bear. Yet the family has always understood something fundamental. You cannot manufacture soul. No amount of capital, no genius marketing, no clever acquisition can substitute for vision. When the heart of the brand is aligned with its commercial instincts, something rare happens. the world pays attention. For now, the family's presence in daily decision-making acts as both an anchor and a compass. The next generation is already asked to balance innovation with stewardship, to honor the past without being trapped by it. Prada's legacy is not a finished tapestry. It's a patchwork, stitched together from triumphs and setbacks, boldness and humility, certainty and doubt. Sometimes its greatest contribution has been to ask questions that have no easy answers. What is the purpose of luxury in a world that questions privilege? How do you sell exclusivity without closing yourself off from new ideas? Can true creativity survive the pressure of quarterly results? As the story continues, Prada's future will likely look nothing like its past. The only constant is change, guided by the restless curiosity of a family that has never been satisfied with easy victories. The torch is already passing quietly from one pair of hands to another, but the real inheritance is not a name or a fortune. It's a habit of mind, the discipline to disrupt, the courage to start over, and the wisdom to know when to hold back. In the end, Prada's legacy is not just written in leather or stitched in silk. It lives in the questions that remain. Maybe that's the true genius of reinvention, never letting the answers get too comfortable, never letting the story end. The world of luxury is always watching, always waiting for what comes next. But inside Prada's walls, the only eyes that matter are the ones looking forward, not back. What does it mean to stay ahead of yourself year after year? For Prada, the answer is still unfolding. And as long as the question remains, so does the brand.